Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4 and episode number 589 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on, well, the Crier Media Network, but more importantly, 100% Canadian. That's good stuff. As you can tell, kids, I'm clearly a little excited today because your beaver comes bearing gifts, but that's just showing a little thigh there because we have a few things to do. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and with me is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. We have a really, really, really good show for you today. But Mr. Grizzly, how is your mental health today, sir?
Not great. I'm still holding on, and I'm wearing a shirt that I should. It's not my shirt. It's actually Bridget's shirt. I just want to go with this part.
Okay.
Let's talk part. Let's forget about who's sponsoring the shirt. It's actually from Irene's.
Oh, nice.
She wanted it. We were at a concert with the Ray Girl. And it was an absolutely amazing show. And Bridget won this as best dancer because they were like they had prizes to give away, and one of them was they're like, okay, so we're looking for the best dancer. So she got up and danced. They go, here you go. She's like, oh really? Anyway, it fits me, and it happened to be the cleanest shirt within arm's reach this morning, so I put it on.
I know that feeling.
It's big on her, and it fits me perfectly.
Oh, well, as you can tell. Oh, okay. It's Ottawa Blues Fest as well.
Blues for Youth. Ottawa Blues for Youth, yeah. So
cool.
There you go.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of that, the Blues Fest, I think, released their lineup.
Yes, they did. Yeah. And there's some pretty good acts that if I have the money, I will happily purchase a ticket and go and attend. Because I've looked at the lineup and I'm like, oh, I'd like to see them. I'd like to see them. I'd like to see them. Shania is going to be here. I haven't seen Shania in a while, so
I know, right?
I saw her was 2017 when she played the Grey Cup.
Oh, I saw her at the, I guess it was the Scotiabank Center then, back at the time in Ottawa. And unfortunately, in a little bit of news, before we get to the big news, that will surely make you a little sad, Mr. Grizzly. Unfortunately, it would appear that the TD group, Toronto Dominion, the bank, have pulled their sponsorship of major jazz festivals across the country.
Oh, really? Why?
Yep.
Why? You got a music hater in the party in the organization now? What the hell? They've been sponsoring jazz fests across the country for decades.
I don't ever remember it not Maybe when I was a kid, I guess it wasn't sponsored by TD, but
I remember in 1990, TD sponsored the Ottawa Jazz Fest, and they had been sponsoring for decades. And I remember that specifically because my buddy got this poster, and he goes, "This is awesome." And his roommate worked at a framing shop, so he brought the poster home, and I guess he had it sitting on a kitchen table. And when he came home from work the next day, she had got it framed for him, and I'm like, "Dude, that's amazing!" It was like a dry fit frame. It was really nice too. Anyway, yeah, that's how I
yeah.
remember that they've been sponsoring jazz festivals for decades.
Yeah, so this is from Josh O'Kane from the Globe and Mail. Toronto Dominion Bank has quietly ended its longtime sponsorship of some of Canada's most prominent jazz festivals, forcing them to cut costs at a time when cultural industries are struggling to attract corporate money. Last year marked the final editions of both the Toronto Jazz Festival and the Calgary's Jazz YYC Summer Festival to feature TD as their principal sponsor with naming rights, while both the Vancouver International Jazz Festival and the Ottawa Jazz Festival lost their lead sponsorships over the past several years. TD says it remains committed to funding Canadian music and arts, ceding money to various awarded organizations holding naming rights to venues in Toronto and Montreal, and sponsoring a handful of jazz-oriented events across the country, including Halifax and the Montreal festivals. But the decision to exit some of Canada's biggest jazz events has left their organizers hard-pressed to find replacement sponsors. TD sponsorship represented about a tenth of Jazz YYC's annual budget, the festival executive and artistic director Cody Hutchison said in an interview. Canada Revenue Agency filings show its total revenue at $472,721 for the fiscal year ended August 2023. Of that, $220,230 came from government funding, and $85,555 was attributed to sponsorship and other support. His small team worked all year to put on 189 events in its 2023-2024 season, including 47 free concerts and workshops. Free shows are a hallmark of Jazz YYC's offerings, building up the community of jazz fans year-round and expanding the festival. But the end of TD sponsorship means cutting more than 40 events throughout the year and a major rejection of the main summer event. Last year, the Summer Festival hosted 42 events, 17 of them free. This year, that number is expected to fall to 19, only 4 of which the organizers plan to offer for free. That's a big drop. Quote, some festivals will have to reduce greatly, which causes further difficulties in getting a sponsor, Hutchinson said. It's circular. Toronto Jazz Festival Artistic Director Josh Grossman said his team is rethinking how it presents concerts this year to reckon with the loss of TD funding. That includes evaluating whether it can afford the infrastructure costs of building some of its outdoor stages. TD gave Grossman's team notice before the 2024 festival that it would end its sponsorship, he said, prompting organizers last year to drop the popular Street Closing Avenue road stage, which recently played host to artists such as Ashanti and Bad Bad Not Good. The reality of taking a bare patch of grass and creating a concert venue is very expensive, Grossman said. He declined to disclose the size of TD's sponsorship, but said that corporate sponsors generally accounted for 30 to 40% of the festival's budget. In the most recent CRA filings, it reported total revenue of $2.3 million. TD would not say why it has stopped its title sponsorship of some of Canada's biggest jazz festivals after many years. Quote, we have made changes to some of our sponsorships over time, said Natasha Ferrari, the bank's senior manager of corporate and public affairs, in an email. Quote, we continue to elevate and celebrate emerging artists and diverse voices through our direct support of 385 arts and cultural organizations across Canada in 2024, including sponsorship of more than 55 music and cultural festivals. And Kits and Cubs, this is a thing that often happens in PR, and it's something that I really, really, really hate when you say, why are you cutting us? But look at everybody else we're sponsoring, because, yeah, that really rubs it in. We haven't abandoned the arts. Look at everybody else we're sponsoring. Yeah, but why not us? Everybody else was deemed worthy. We're not anymore. We'd like to know why. Well, we support all these. That's that they either have no answer, or the answer they would give would not go over well. Well, actually, I can't say they have no answer. There's always an answer.
There's
Right?
always an answer.
Just like when somebody asks you, why did you do that? And you go, I don't know. Say, yeah, you do. Think. Because nobody does anything for no reason. right? You might not be aware of it, might not be conscious, but you did it for a reason. Think of it. So, yeah, my guess is if you get that kind of answer, it's because um, just it's not a reason that would go over very well, particularly with jazz fans, I would say. Um, Corporate sponsors have turned their attention away from major arts sponsorships in the past decade, with their dollars flowing more frequently to sports and cause-oriented organizations. Even after Bank of Nova Scotia gave the organizers of Toronto's Contact Photography Festival 18 months' notice of that the 2024 edition would be its last as title sponsor, it took the festival until last month to find new major not title sponsors in the Bank of Montreal and Power Corporation of Canada. TD's brand has been tightly intertwined with jazz across Canada for more than 2 decades, ever since public pushback and federal regulations prompted the cigarette brand Du Maurier to stop its longtime title sponsorship around the turn of the millennium. That's right, it was the Du Maurier Jazz Festival when I was young.
Yep.
I forgot.
Cigarette companies are not allowed to sponsor anything anymore because their product is inherently dangerous. At some point in time, I can see that happening with alcohol companies too.
Yeah, just like the tennis tournament used to be the Players' Championship.
Correct.
Players cigarettes.
Yeah.
Like I remember that. Yes, cigarette companies were sponsoring it.
How can you tell Canadian cigarettes apart from American cigarettes? Well, these ones are export. These ones are export. Export.
Love it.
Green Death.
I'm sure there's a parallel joke with Craven,
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely.
Somewhere. So yeah. In December, the co-chairs of the Vancouver International Jazz Festival's organizing body, Coastal Jazz, issued a public plea to fans acknowledging the consequences of TD's 2022 exit. Less sponsorship combined with rising costs and decreased overall arts funding, quote, has compounded to be a very precarious landscape for arts organizations like Coastal Jazz, they wrote, saying they'd had to cut costs by reducing the festival's length, letting go of staff, and reducing free programming. They sought to direct donations. Moving forward, the future Coastal Jazz and Festival lies in the hands of our community. So yeah, that's seems to be happening a lot, unfortunately. And unfortunately, arts is often the first thing to go when things get a little tight, which is sad because when things get a little tight, sometimes we need arts more than ever. Helps us get some stuff out.
Oh my goodness. I have to share something with you I just ran across. This is just wow. So I'm going to start with the first tweet and we'll scroll down because when you see this, you'll be like, wow. Honest to goodness. So the food professor, I was a military officer for 5 years and studied military strategic studies. We should all pay much closer attention to the food professor's time in the military. Questions of particular interest. How long was he in the military? What did he study at CMR? And what was the highest rank he obtained? Did he ever face a court-martial? And how did he leave the forces? Well, I responded, but here's the better part. Answers. We know he was an officer cadet at CMR from 89 to 92. He studied commerce. He was discharged as an officer cadet. He did face a court-martial and pled guilty, and he left with a degree and honorable discharge after an out-of-court settlement with CMR and the forces. And these are all like court documents. But it's the next part that really shook me. Aaron O'Toole, former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Good grief, grow up or sign up yourself. And it's Aaron O'Toole. It's him.
Pardon me?
Yeah. What the fuck, dude? I like this. In other words, he was never an officer. He was in the military for 3 years, not 5. He pled guilty at court-martial to financial fraud, was dishonorably discharged and denied a degree, and was eventually granted a degree and a discharge in an out-of-court settlement.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but it's like, oh shit. Aaron O'Toole. Really? Really? The court documents are right. They're right there. He showed you them. And that's, wow. Like, wow.
Yep. Sometimes they show you who they are.
Well, from our friend you, Aaron O'Toole got his helicopter lost in visible conditions over Halifax.
He what? He
Yeah,
lost a helicopter?
Yeah. It's documented. It's recorded history. It did happen. I remember reading about it a few years ago. I mean, just when Aaron O'Toole does something, you think, oh yeah, okay, and that's yeah. Then he pulls this shit. It's like, Christ Almighty, what are you, 12? What is wrong with you, man? I mean, it's bad enough you closed Veterans Affairs Office and screwed veterans over. It's bad enough you did that, but now you're calling somebody out for citing the fact that a guy who said he was in there for 5 years and studied strategic studies never studied that and was only in there for 3 and was booted. Booted for being part of a Ponzi scheme. And you want to defend? Fuck off.
Wow.
Fuck off.
Wow.
Hey, Aaron O'Toole, fuck all the way
Oh,
off. That's it. That's it. That's all I've got to say.
Okay.
No, I'm not angry about it. I'm just like shocked.
I know.
Shocked.
It's dumb.
It's like,
I think that there's expression, I think it's a Mark Twain one. Better to keep your mouth shut and let the world think you a fool than to open it and remove all doubt.
yes, indeed.
That was a swing. He could have let slide by.
He should have just walked away from that one.
That was a pitch he could have let slide by. You don't have to swing at every pitch.
No, you just look at that one and go, nope.
Yep. Mixing up my sports metaphors. Now, kids, if you're wondering why I'm in such a good mood today, Beaver Lodge curling report. After 21 years of curling, last night, inspired by Rachel Holman, I threw my first perfect game.
Oh, nice.
11-0 after 5 ends, the other team conceded. I made everything, and not just made them with the rolls behind cover and everything was just, I could not miss yesterday. It's like, oh, that's what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I felt like a stud. I did. I have to say, it's like, yeah, I did that. Yeah. Now watch me go on the ice, play my next match, and not make a damn hit. Overconfident, but yeah. So yeah, happy Beaver here, and I'm also happy, kids and cubs, because Mr. Grizzly, I sent you something.
Oh, you did?
I did. I believe I did. Please tell me I did.
Well, I don't have my
because sometimes it goes into it's going to stay stuck in my outbox. Yeah, I did.
I'm just opening my email now. I had some technical issues, so I had to shut a bunch of stuff down.
And I'm going to have to put on my little holiday festive gear here. Honk, honk. And because your Queen Beaver comes bringing gifts today. You remember a while ago when I told you in the polls the declining number of seats was 201, then 200, then 197, whatnot? Well, that lead shrunk again on Sunday when the aggregates came out one more time. And once again, for the 4th reporting period in a row. Now, this is the 7th in a row where the numbers go down for the Conservatives and the seat lead go down. But this is the 4th week in a row where the seat gap narrows by 30 seats or more. So 3 weeks ago, it was 34 seats, and the spread was 157. 2 weeks ago, 121. Last week, 91. This week, it's 57. Right? So the Conservatives are just 6 seats away from minority territory, which is that first milestone I told you. Yes.
Mhm.
And then the second one was lines intersecting. Well, according to the polls, even though it hasn't showed up in the aggregates yet because they will be next Sunday, what does the EKOS poll say, most recent EKOS poll say, Mr. Grizzly?
38-37.
38 for who?
The Liberal Party.
And 37 for who?
The Conservative Party. And Ipsos says 38-36. Leger's 35-38, and Nanos is 33-37. They're all pretty darn close, though. Like, I'm looking at them here and like, well, they're all pretty close.
Ipsos has Liberals +2, EKOS has Liberals +1, Leger has Conservatives +3, Nanos has Conservatives +4. They're all within a 6-point range.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time and I am scrolling down here and scrolling and scrolling, for the first time since March 11th, 2023, the Liberals lead any national poll.
Yes. Well, and who was it? Andrew Coyne the other day stated something to the effect of, whenever the next federal election comes along, Pierre Poilievre, who had a 30-plus point lead, has completely blown it. It will be the biggest defeat in Canadian history. And I'm like, look.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
It had nothing to do with Pierre Poilievre. People don't like him. He's not a likable person, and for good reason. It was people didn't like Justin Trudeau because they've been told for the last 8 years that you're supposed to hate him by American-owned media. So he resigns, and new people come into the fray to lead the Liberal Party, and we have a leadership election coming up soon. I say we because we're Canadians. I'm not a member of any party, so I can't vote. But anybody who holds party membership can vote in the upcoming leadership election and have a direct hand in playing a part for the first time, probably in your life, on who the next prime minister is, because they assume the position when the current prime minister resigns.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very rare circumstance under our system where you can actually vote for the prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you live in the riding of that member's constituency, unless you live there, you cannot vote for the prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
So, we don't elect a prime minister. We never have. We elect a parliament. Yeah. And this is what I need to get people to fully understand. When they say, I'm voting for Trudeau, I'm like, well, do you live in downtown Ottawa? How can you vote for him? Well, I'm voting for him. You can't do that. You literally cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's geographically impossible for you to do that. You live in downtown Ottawa, you have to vote if you want to vote for the Liberal member of Parliament in downtown Ottawa, it's Yasser Naqvi. That's who you would vote for. I need people to understand how our system works. And unfortunately, too many Canadians don't know. They've watched too much American television and think they have a Fifth Amendment.
Yeah. Gentle correction on myself. Actually, it's the first time since May 28th, 2023, not March 11th. But Leger was the last ones to show them in the lead. And the last time there were two companies that showed them went back to February 26, 2023. So this is big, namely because in these two, EKOS has a B+ rating, but Ipsos has an A+. So not only do we have an intersection between the red line and the blue line, but one of the three companies with an A+ rating is showing that. And the trend keeps on appearing to move upwards. So far, there's no, how would I put it? There's not going to be much further higher that the Liberals can go, numbers wise. I mean, when you're at 38, maybe 41, 42, you can top out at sometimes. I mean, the 47s and the 50s from the Conservatives a while ago, that was just, we all knew that there's no way that was all actual Conservative vote, right? A lot of that was parked vote, clearly. So, you're at about the maximum of the range here. But remember, Kits, one thing that I always tell you, when you see Liberals 38 and Conservatives 36, and once again, you remember that Conservative vote in Saskatchewan and Alberta and the interior of British Columbia is massive. So that 36 is really like a 33 or a 32. We're talking definite Liberal government, potentially Liberal majority numbers. Here. So, as I mentioned, there are three milestones, right? On the aggregate number, the Conservatives dropping below minority status, because that would be the end of Pierre. Even if the Conservatives won, like this, but with a minority, that would be the end of him. Because the lines intersecting, showing the Liberals winning, like this, and if the Liberal line should cross into majority territory on the aggregate. And each one, you are going to see the attacks get more strident, more shrill. Remember the other day, we showed you Pierre Poilievre actually looking at you straight in the face, voters of Canada, and telling you that Mark Carney is the one that's doing nothing but sloganeering.
Well,
that's a sign of the desperation, and it's going to get more and more so as these milestones cross. Now, if these numbers keep on declining, if the numbers decline by another 30, like they have by at least 30 by the last four, the next polling number, aggregate number, will not only show the Conservatives cross that minority line, but also the Liberal line and the Conservative line would intersect on the aggregate graph in the same week in one. So there'd be two milestones crossed on the aggregate in one reporting period, should that happen. These numbers might tend to indicate that that is indeed potentially the case, because the Léger number that came out that shows Conservatives leading +3 on February 16th, just 6 days previous, showed Conservatives +8. So that's a 5-point narrowing of the gap in 5 days. The Ipsos number that just came in, they were longer out. The last time they were out was February 1st, so in 22 days. But 22 days ago, Ipsos was showing Conservatives +13. Now they're showing Liberals +2. That's a 15-point swing in Ipsos.
Well,
in 22 days. The Nanos one shows Conservatives +4 right now, but the last time Nanos was out was on the 14th, Valentine's Day, showed Conservatives +7. So even the Nanos number narrowed by 3. So Nanos narrowed by 3, EKOS narrowed by 5, Ipsos narrowed by 15, and Léger narrowed by 5. And that's just 4 of the companies. There's still more coming in.
Well, and this is an interesting comment, and I've from Saucy Sea Witch, and I've read something along the lines of what she's saying, which is why Carney plans to call an election immediately after the party race. He's not giving the Conservatives any time to build a defense or dump Poilievre before the fall election. And I agree with that statement. I mean, that seems to be the method and pathway that they seem to choose. And I understand why, because like all that the Conservatives have had for the last 9 years is Justin Trudeau has destroyed planet Earth. He's an idiot who can't do anything right, but he does everything wrong. What? They blame him for everything wrong in the country when 99% of the things they're blaming him for are either external circumstances or Conservative premiers.
Right. So the more that these milestones are reached, the higher the likelihood that Mark Carney is going to win on the 9th and then just basically say, hey, let's go do this. But if you are a savvy investor, Kits and Cubs, not that you should take any investing advice from a beaver and a grizzly, but I believe investing in some popcorn and lots of butter might be a very worthwhile thing, because if the Conservatives blow a 20-something point lead, I would suggest that we're going to start to see some infighting within the Conservative ranks, a little backbiting maybe. And should the we go to full election and it ends up being a Liberal majority. Wouldn't it be nice if that happened to be the end of a certain Miss Jenni Byrne?
Well, somebody as angry as she is, I mean, and I say this with all sincerity, and I do mean this when I say this. She has so much anger and hatred in her. I hope she finds the help she desperately needs. I sincerely mean that.
She
I
has been
hope she I hope she
one of
finds the
the
help she needs because
one,
she has issues.
she's been one of the key people in making our politics as toxic as they've been
Yes.
over the
And
last
she needs
25
help.
years.
It's not even up for debate. She needs help, and I hope she gets it. As
Yeesh.
as a compassionate human being, I hope she gets it because she needs help. I mean, somebody with that much toxicity in them, she's going to head to an early grave.
Mm. Oh yeah, that's some. Listen, if you drop it. When you work in this type of field, the level of stress and booze and cursing and
Mhm,
whatnot
mhm.
that
Oh,
goes
yeah.
behind on like this. When you had a 20-something point lead and you thought you had it in the back and it drops like that, that's something that caused somebody to have an aneurysm
Well,
somewhere along the way.
and I mean, for somebody, and we've looked at photos of both her and Pierre Poilievre from 10 years ago versus today. And it's like, how do you age 30 years in 10 years?
Mm.
And people have gotten mad at me for that. I go, I'm not picking on their appearance. I'm trying to say, look, these are two people that are so filled with anger, hatred, and rage, and possibly both, possibly, maybe speculating, they may have an alcohol consumption problem. Maybe. I'm not saying they do, but these are two individuals who are so filled with hatred, anger, and rage that they have aged 30 years in the past 10. Both of them. Hatred does that to you. I'm
Mm.
what? Am I 12 or 13 years older than Pierre Poilievre?
Oh
Put a head of
god.
hair on me and I'll look a lot younger.
Are you sure about that? I don't know.
I'll be 57 in July.
Yeah, you got 12 years on them.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All
Yeah.
I'm saying, and I don't mean to upset people. I'm not picking on them. I'm not. I hope they both get the help they so obviously desperately need. Because somebody filled with that much rage and hatred will send you to an early grave. Stress kills, man. Somebody
Mhm.
with that much anger, hatred, rage, and obvious stress will send you to an early grave. I hope they get the help they need. And I sincerely mean that
Okay.
because I hate to see human beings suffer,
Hmm.
even those I don't like. Here's the other thing. The other side of that coin, if they get the help they need, they may very well realize the error of their ways.
Mhm. Indeed. So, these 4 most recent polls came out on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and that means the Liberals were going into their debates on that good news. Now, I don't know if too many of these polls were released publicly. I think some of them were released publicly by the time the French debate started, but I hadn't picked up on these before watching both debates. So I just yes, as I was watching the debates last night, I just let's go take a look at the polls, for example. And then I looked and holy crap. So I hadn't seen any big articles with big headlines or whatnot. Yes, but I know that in the pre-show for the French language debate, um, David Cochrane had mentioned that there were some polls that had indicated that the Liberals had
Mm.
taken the lead, but that was about the extent of in my regular life that I would have come across it had I watched the pre-show at the time of the debate, knowing that the polls had flipped. So it hasn't gotten a lot of news yet
Mm.
that this has happened. Um, but the Liberals went into their 2 debates with that. So they went into the French debate, and I got to finish it the other day. And Karina Gould clearly won the French debate.
Well, and everybody says the same thing. Like everything I've read is like, oh, wow. So, well, and here's the best part. It's like, whoa, we didn't know much about her before. People who didn't know much about her before do now.
Yeah.
And as I have said time and time again, and I will say it again today, she is the future of that party. She is.
Yeah. Now, some might not agree with all the policies or that type of stuff like this, but in terms of presentation, being substantive, giving meaningful answers,
Mhm.
how she came across, Canada loves her as well. It was hard to do better, and she was by far the most comfortable in French. She is also the one that is most willing to roll up some sleeves, make some stuff happen a little bit. Now, the French debate, like I said, how would I put it? It was very good in the sense that you had 4 leaders, I guess 3 of whom, uh, I think maybe even 4. I'm not sure if Frank Bayless's first language is French but he did go to French school his entire life.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
uh, but let's say for sure I know that the other 3 that French is not their mother tongue, right? All on that stage, and possibly 4 that French is not their mother tongue, all on that stage, having a full 2-hour debate in French. French of various qualities, whatnot, but still French, and everybody pretty much was able to make themselves understood, although you could tell that the lack of ability in French in terms of tone, inflection, personal dynamism
Mhm. Mhm.
was holding people back, that they were so focused on the French or whatnot, that all that kind of stuff. So it was a little boring and plodding to watch in that
Well,
sense.
well, I need to add to the conversation here because Michael Barrett said Mark Carney should be able to
Oh,
speak
yes.
better French. Except before anyone judges the quality of French of the Liberal candidates, here's Stephen Harper saying erections instead of elections in French. And I will play this because it's kind of funny.
En voulez-vous des élections? Combien ça coûte une élection? Une 5e élection? Êtes-vous tanné d'avoir des...
Are
It
you
goes on
tired
for
of
a minute
having
and
erections?
13.
Then let me hear you now. Yeah.
It goes on for a minute and 13 seconds. I played 14 seconds of the clip. He says it repeatedly, and people are cheering.
Okay. Now listen, the Michael Barrett thing, right?
It's,
He came down, and this is how you know this is bullshit. Mike Barrett came down and criticized Carney's level of French
mhm.
in English.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Just let that sink in for a bit.
Pot, have you met the kettle yet?
I care so much about the Francophone culture and the Francophone language that I'm going to rush down these stairs and I'm going to say, Carney, oh my God, I can't believe that a man can't communicate in French so much. Like, people have a right to that like this. It's just so outrageous. And I'm saying this in English. What's this face again? my unimpressed face. It's girl. No. And number one, as a Francophone,
Mhm, mhm.
the conservative movement in Canada, the traditional anti-Quebec, anti-French movement, you're going to come down that stairs and try to make me believe that you care about me, and you're not even going to do it in my language. I remember my history classes. Heck, I've heard Danielle Smith speak. I just saw Danielle Smith throw supply management under the bus because it's Quebec. Dude, don't come and tell me that conservatives are the party of francophones. Dude. It's like, yeah.
They try and play it up because every time Pierre Poilievre has a press conference, he starts in French and
Yeah.
talks for 15 or 20 minutes, then switches to English.
Harper did
He's
the
trying
same
to
thing.
placate. Yeah.
Harper
But
did the
here's
same
the thing.
thing. But okay.
They're going to fail miserably because Quebec is onto him. And I saw something from Yves Duclos yesterday.
Jean-Yves Duclos. Yeah.
Yes, Jean-Yves Duclos, where, and I can't remember if I bookmarked it or not. I'll see if I can find it. And it went along the lines of they really did tear into Pierre Poilievre due to the fact that Pierre Poilievre, and no, unfortunately, I didn't bookmark it when I thought I did, unfortunately, so I don't have it. But Pierre Poilievre wants to cancel the tramway in Quebec City.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tramway that's being planned for the province of Quebec. It's getting federal and provincial funding, and it will create 20,000 jobs and add $4 billion to the local economy. He wants to cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that's going to go over in Quebec when Jean-Yves Duclos is pointing out that Pierre Poilievre wants to cancel public transit for Quebec City?
Yep.
And his take is, well, Quebec City's not big enough. I go, you dumb shit. Quebec's growing. The same way Ottawa's growing. Do you realize that when
after the 400th anniversary, Quebec just went boom?
Do you realize that when Toronto built its first subway, Canada's first subway in the 1950s, Toronto had just surpassed 1 million in population. When Ottawa started work on its LRT, we were just around the 1 million mark. So Ottawa's public rail transit was started at the same population rate that Toronto's was. This is a good thing. Build now so that in the future, it's less expensive. Because if you build 30 years from now, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more. Ottawa's downtown transit tunnel was first proposed in 1989 by then Mayor I can see his face. He was a car dealer. He was the mayor at the time. He ran the Rough Riders.
Jim Durrell.
Jim Durrell, thank you.
Yeah.
Jim Durrell. It was first proposed in 1989 by Jim Durrell. He says, well, what we'll do is we'll build a tunnel. It will start around where the current tunnel is and go right through onto LeBreton Flats, where the current
everybody laughed
transitway
at him
was.
back then.
And they all laughed at him, said, how much will that cost? And he said, about $600 million. And they said, that's too much money. How much time will it save? And he said, currently about 3 minutes. And they go, that's not worth it. And he goes, I don't want to build this for today. I want to build it now so that in 30 years from now, when the city is over 1 million people, Ottawa will never be that big. Yeah, according to other people, we were never supposed to surpass the 300,000 mark. And we're now 1.1 million just in the city of Ottawa and another 500,000 across the river in Gatineau. It's almost 1.7 million.
Yep.
In Ottawa, Gatineau. And despite the fact the river separates us, it's one big metropolitan community. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when they ridiculed him for wanting to build something 30 plus years ago, saving us money today because it cost us, what, $2.5 billion to build the existing tunnel and the existing system, which is being expanded upon constantly. He's like, we could have built that for $600 million and bought the equipment from Edmonton, who had just built theirs. Edmonton got smart and built it long before they hit the 1 million mark. Years, like decades before, because they realized the city's growing and it will get bigger. We're going to need a public rail transit system.
Yep.
Got smart and built it then.
Yep.
What does Ottawa do? Oh, I don't know. It's a lot of money.
And
they ridiculed him for it.
And then John Baird kneecapped us.
Yes. And now you have Quebec City trying to avoid the problems that we are facing today by building for the future now, and you have Pierre Poilievre who wants to cancel the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about population. According to the last census, 2021, the population of the regional metropolitan area of Quebec is 839,311. Closing in on the million.
It's probably much closer to 1 million by now, I would assume.
Well, yeah, that's 3 years, yeah. But at the last census, 2021, 4 years ago.
4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 840,000. So you're closing in on the million.
Yeah.
By the time you plant it, you build it, whatnot, like this, you'll be over the million by the time it's built.
Well, and in this past summer, I was driving my folks home from New Brunswick, and we hit the outer Quebec City region, and we were on the south shore, by the way. South shore of the St. Lawrence. Quebec City's on the north shore. We're on the south shore of the St. Lawrence, and it took us about 2 hours to get through the traffic. On the south, not even in the city. Not even in the city. It took us 2 hours to get through. So, building a transit system, a public transit system by rail, which moves more people more quickly, is always a good thing. There's not a city on earth that has a metro system, a metro rail system, that regrets building it. There's not a city on earth that has ever made turned a profit or even for that matter, balance the books on rail systems, but none of them regret it. None of them, because it moves people quicker, it's cleaner, it's safer, it's much more efficient. I looked at Shenzhen's in China, which 40 years ago was a city of it was a fishing village 40 years ago. Now it's about, I don't know, 18 or 19 million people. They have built a system, a metro system that rivals Paris, New York, and London, and they've done it in less than 15 years. It's unbelievable. And what do we do here? Well, I don't know. Maybe we should think about it and do it. Just build it, man. And Pierre Poilievre wants to cancel the one in Quebec City. So the province of Quebec, do not vote Conservative. If you do, you're voting against your own best interest, period.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right. Now, kits and cubs, they had the English language debate last night that we need to get to. And unfortunately, we're going to have to do this in a slightly weird way for me because I am very cute. When I was taking notes for the debate this morning, apparently I plugged in my phone only 3/4 of the way and the connection did not do it. So I wasted about half of my battery.
Yes.
Getting
and I can see it
timestamps.
because you're blocky and fuzzy right now.
Yes.
You're
So what we will do is that we will play some segments, probably uninterrupted, unless Mr. Grizzly really feels it needs to cut in. But and when those segments play, then I'll be able to go plug in the wall and then rejuice a little bit, and then come back and then chat
Is
with
there
you
a
about them.
particular starting point for this that you want me to go with?
Yes, there is. Now, first, some overall impressions. Where I was mentioning about the French debate, there was a lack of dynamism because they're focusing on the language, and like I said, even with the various qualities of language, this was probably the one of the better French language debates, federally or for party leadership, that I have witnessed, in that we had 4 people, the majority of whom were not Quebec born, and French was not their mother tongue, actually holding a full 2-hour debate in French, offering substance, whatnot. So, I mean, what it lacked in passion, what it lacked in color, what it lacked in showmanship, um, you know, it had in effort, it had in, you know, obvious that everybody, for where they are in their language, has been practicing and working on it, various degrees of comfort. It was something like this. If
Mhm.
you're a francophone like this, you could be looking at this like, oh my God, in my ears, and then you could be looking at like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I tend to be on the more grateful than greedy side.
Mhm.
Um, to me, this is what I saw is something that, rather than poo-poo on for it not being perfect, I would rather praise and hope that the positive reinforcement encourages other people to keep doing it and doing it more. Because I would like to see this level. I would like to see this level of that debate be the minimum henceforth,
Okay.
right? But it was good in that sense. But it did require work. If you were a francophone, it did require work to fill in blanks, see where they were going. Sometimes ideas were not connected well. Words were mispronounced. Sometimes words were omitted. There was one big thing where there was an attempt on an issue about Palestine, where Frank, somebody said something like Hamas is not there, and Mr. McCartney wanted to say, I agree with you about
Yeah,
Hamas.
they took it out of context completely. Yeah.
No, not about none. Well, yes and no. I agree with you about Hamas, but he said, I agree with Hamas, is how it came, rather
Yes.
than I agree on Hamas.
And then they went, "Oh, he's supporting Hamas." He's like,
Yeah, because they took that
"No."
5-second clip.
Yeah.
It's where he stumbled on the word and then ran with that and didn't show. But if you actually watch the debate, actually, like Christopher Freeland turned around and says, well, you mean it with the, like this? He goes, yes, that's what I mean. And everyone was like, because
He
everybody
came
on
to
it,
his defense because they
well,
knew.
they knew what was going to happen with that. But number
Yeah,
one is, they also all know him and they know what his personal position is, right? So,
exactly.
and number two, it's also the thing to do for the party because you do not want that to be the distraction. So
Well,
everybody was able
exactly.
to think on their feet in that moment, and it could have been an opportunity to pounce on your thing and like get them, boom, 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 like this.
And they didn't do
No,
that.
they didn't do
No.
that.
No,
So
they
this
didn't
is
do
a
that.
party.
And
This is
and
a
I
party
love
for all the turmoil that is together.
all of the con commentators online were like, he loves Hamas. I'm like, no. You watch that and see that you can take that little clip and say that, sure. But if you actually watch the entire thing, it's like, and the budget will balance itself. Again, watch the entire clip.
Yeah.
If you pick and choose, you're being disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would be like, because like, wow, Stephen Harper sure does love erections.
Yeah. Well, he said it about
Running with
30 times in a minute and 13 seconds, so he must really love erections.
Clearly, it's a slip of the tongue multiple times, but clearly it's a slip of the tongue.
Or he's
right?
invested in Cialis or what's the other one?
Yes, really.
What are the two? What are the boner pills? Cialis and what's the other one?
Viagra.
Viagra. Maybe he's invested in those companies. I don't know.
Hi,
And it was
I'm Douglas
subliminal
running.
advertising.
Hi, I'm Douglas from the Beaver Party. Vote for my erection.
What?
What? Oh God. Okay. So but they had some personality types. Like I said, of the four, Mark Carney was able to show the least amount of personality and dynamism. But if you listened to the reviews of the French debate, it's like if there was one word about the French debate is "Je suis d'accord." It's like I agree, and you have
We're
to
not bullying anybody here. We're having a chuckle.
Yeah, you have to understand, right, that this is a liberal leadership race. So of course they're mostly going to agree. They are liberals, right? But they are going to disagree. In the English language debate, there was more disagreement. But here's the thing: it's like a lot of the disagreement was very subtly delivered. You had to pay attention. It's like, oh, okay, you mentioned that before, and there's like a little word in your response. They weren't like boom, punch in your face jabs like this. They were like nice little boom, boom, polite like this, but they were jabs nonetheless. Like this. And Karina Gould was definitely willing, again, in English, to roll up the sleeves. I counted at least 5 or 6 different times where she said things or challenged Mark Carney or whatnot. So Karina Gould is very much aware with the fundraising numbers and all that things coming up that she could finish second.
Okay. We're
And
gonna have to
she's
run the
pushing
clip
Carney.
because your battery is going to die on you any second right now. You're really blocky and distorted right now, sir. Like you're so out of focus. It looks like you're in 280p, 140p. Like although you're looking very Christ-like at the moment. So that maybe that's
like looking very Christ-like.
well, yeah, because you just have the long hair and the beard.
Okay.
And you're not super white, so you're looking very Christ-like in that aspect.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. I did see myself on the screen. Yeah, I don't know why that's happening, actually, because on my phone, I'm, like, super clear.
No,
Okay.
not here. It must be heating up or something. That's
Yeah,
all
must be. All right. So, here, let's do this then. We're going to go to 2805.
Before we do that, I want to talk to Mr. Jim here because Mr. Jim thinks we're bullying Stephen Harper for messing up when he spoke French. We're not doing that, sir. I need you to understand something, Mr. Jim. We're not bullying Stephen Harper for making a mistake. We are chuckling at the mistake he made. And the reason we were doing that is because Michael Barrett directly said, Mark Carney needs to speak better French. And we were trying to point out the fact that the prime minister at the time spoke French probably as well as Mark Carney does. We're not bullying anybody. We're pointing out a simple fact and trying to show you that if one person says this person needs to speak better French, it's like as good as that guy did. That's it. We're not bullying anybody. We're pointing out a simple fact that was made and brought to our attention to let you know that if you're going to pick on this guy for what he did, we're going to point out what your guy did. It's just an eye for an eye, an apple to an apple, not an apple to an orange. That's it. That's all. Just wanted to let you know that. Okay? Not picking on anybody, but if you're going to point out somebody's malfeasance or mistakes in a language, let's look at the former leader and his mistakes. Apples to apples, quite literally. That's all it is.
Yeah. This one, if we go to 2805, so the debate was put into 4 different themes: Canada's place in the world, growing a strong economy, supporting Canadians, and climate change. And I believe it was similar for French. No, actually, there's probably a little something different there in French's too, because there are certain things that are specific to the culture. They had the opening statements, and then the first question was, how will you stand up to Trump in defense of Canada? And they each gave some answers, and things were really good. They were okay there. But when we got to the open debate, there was a question basically asked, why do you think Trump is doing this? And this is really good because you get to see how the 4 candidates do something that's called an analysis of the public environment, I guess, as it comes to Trump. So how they're analyzing where he's putting his stuff, in what context, how it's playing out, what his goals might be. And you can see here, why I'm bringing it is that you've got 4 quality people who think, who can reason, who can come up with a very, very solid hypothesis about it and discuss it in full sentences like adults. So this will go from 2805 to 3537, it'll be about 7 minutes, and I will go plug in and come back.
All righty.
It wins.
And now we will move into that first 5-minute debate. Thank you for pointing that out. This is an open debate. Mr. Bayless, we'll start first with you. Others can join in on this debate, but please try not to talk over each other too much. We will control that. So here's the question. Knowing the why is vital in negotiations, or you're essentially just negotiating against yourself. So why is President Trump doing this to Canada?
Well, President Trump needs to show that he has a win on the border. And he's got himself elected by saying he's going to deal with illegal immigration. And right away, he puts out a tweet saying there's a problem with Canada and Mexico. The problem is, for him, there is no problem with Canada. We know it, and the Americans know it. So he's trying to make one so that he can later solve it. Now, I want to point something out. This is not a negotiations. This is a shakedown. We have an agreement. He negotiated the agreement. He signed the agreement. The problem we have is he's not respecting the agreement.
So you believe it's the border, is what I feel for you.
I'm saying that that's his red herring, that he's trying to say we're a problem with the border that he's going to solve.
Ms. Freeland and then Mr. Carney.
Trump is starting with us for a very simple reason. If you can show the world that you can beat up on Canada, your best friend, your reliable, trustworthy neighbor, then think about how the rest of the world feels. It is the demonstration effect. It is saying, if I can beat up on those guys, imagine what I can do to you. And that's why a smart Canadian strategy needs to start with looking for allies, working in the first instance with Mexico, Panama, Denmark, and the EU, who all face the same sovereignty challenge. I think we need to invite the Secretary General of NATO to that first summit that I will host right after becoming Prime Minister. Working with our allies, we form a common front and stop Trump from doing what he wants to do, which is pick us off one after the other.
Mr. Carney, you're up next.
I want to pick up on what Christia just said, because I think underlying all this is what President Trump is looking for is to dominate the hemisphere. He wants to enlarge U.S. power into Canada, into Greenland, into the Panama Canal, as was just mentioned. So the stakes are very, very high. This is a serious crisis, not just an economic crisis, it's a crisis of sovereignty. So yes, we do need to build our allies. But interests of time, I'm going to add one other thing, and we'll come back to this later. We also need to build our economy. We need to build our economy right here. If we have one Canadian economy instead of 13, that more than outweighs the impact of what he's trying to do to us.
So Ms. Gould?
Yeah, thank you. And where, as I see where my colleagues are going, and I appreciate, I think all of that is probably true, except what did we just see in Ukraine? He did a deal with Putin for critical minerals in Ukraine. Who else has critical minerals? Canada. And so we need to understand what the US is trying to do here, but we also need to make sure that we are standing up for our sovereignty and for our economy. You know, last night there was a bunch of conversations with colleagues who said, well, I'm not even going to talk to Donald Trump. Well, guess what? We don't have that choice. We have to talk to him. That is something that we absolutely have to do on behalf of Canadians. We might not like it, but that is the role of the Prime Minister, to stand up and fight for Canada every single day. And that is exactly what I am going to do. Stand up for Canadians, stand up for our industries, and to say that we have leverage, we have things the US wants, and we're not afraid to use them. And if that means that Americans are going to see increased prices or American industries are going to suffer, we will make sure that we put everything on the table as Canada, because our sovereignty, our economy, our jobs are non-negotiable.
Okay, Mr. Bayliss, let's try to go 30 more seconds because we have more interactions here.
Let me tell you the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go fly down and meet President Sheinbaum of Mexico. This is a very strong, smart lady. And I'm going to make a deal with her and say, look, we need to stand up together to Mr. Trump. He said he's putting 25% tariffs on both of us. He can't do that. It'll destroy his economy. So we need to call his bluff. And then what we need to do is take off the table what was already given for nothing, which is the work that we were going to do on our border for $1.3 billion and the work that she was going to do on her border, and say, you know what? That's off the table now. We're back to square zero. That's how I will deal with President Trump.
Okay, Mr. Carney, do you want to jump in, and then Ms. Freeland?
Let me make 2 points. One is you have to be able to do more than one thing at one time as Prime Minister. So that means building the economy. It means negotiating with allies, leveraging our critical minerals, leveraging our clean energy with those allies. That's critically important. And hitting hard with a real negotiation with President Trump, which includes dollar-for-dollar tariffs, includes using all the cards potentially that we have, and they are considerable, as the U.S.'s largest client.
But yesterday,
let me get Ms. Freeland in first, and then just 1 second, Ms. Freeland, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Gould.
Recognize about President Trump is, with him, weakness is a provocation, and capitulation is not a negotiating strategy. The great thing is, right now, Canadians get it. There is this wave of patriotism in Canada, and Canadians are going to stand and fight for Canada. They need a leader who knows how to lead that fight and rally that wave of patriotism. I'm the leader who can do that.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you. Well, one thing that I would like to ask Mr. Carney, because yesterday he made some mentions of sectors that he would protect over others. And I think what is really important is to understand which sectors you're willing to protect, but which sectors you would negotiate away. And that is something that I think as Canadians, we need to understand, because as Prime Minister, I'm not going to negotiate any of those sectors away. I'm going to stand up for people in every single province and territory, every single sector, to make sure that we protect Canadian jobs and protect our industries.
Okay, as moderator, all due respect, I'm going to try to ask the questions, but I am going to give Mr. Carney the opportunity to respond to that as well, Ms.
So let me be clear about a few things. One, not everyone would have watched the debate last night. So in a negotiation, if there are things that should never enter into the negotiation, language, culture, our water, you make clear at the start of the negotiation that they are off the table. Second thing is that the other aspects, for example, our auto sector, I'll give an example, which is intimately and interconnected with the United States. We're going to negotiate around maintaining a good deal for our auto sector. But that is not the same as accepting a bad deal, Karina.
Well, actually, when it comes to the auto sector,
10 seconds
in the previous NAFTA negotiation, we got a better deal than we had before. We changed the rules of origin for car parts that it gave an advantage to high-wage Canadian workers. That's the kind of approach we need to take.
Ms. Gould, do you want 10 seconds before we move on?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, we are going to move on then. Thank you. That was a great, fulsome debate. We're going to move on to the next section, where it's a 1-minute response each for each.
I'll just bring Mr. Beaver back. There he is.
All right there. So, yeah, that section you could see, I saw a lot of hundreds going up as Christian Freeland was speaking there at one point, because she did nail at one point in that section when she's bringing it all together, and says we need this, and I was like, I have done that, or I will do that, and she made a nice little package and closed it all off there. So again, right, like lots of good things when we're talking about why is Trump doing this. He needs to win at the border. Christian Freeland said it's the demonstration effect. It's a bit of that Chinese proverb. Sometimes you need to choke the chicken to scare the monkeys, or kill the chicken to scare the monkeys.
There's a difference.
Yeah, sorry, choked. But joke.
There's a huge difference. Kill the chicken. If you choke the chicken, that's a different show altogether.
Sometimes you need to kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. Choke the chicken. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's for the OnlyFans.
I'm very cute today, kids and cubs. I'm very cute today. Not very bright. And then, of course, Mark Carney, that it's a crisis of sovereignty. And then you got Karina Gould, that says, we're going to have to talk to him anyway. But, clearly, look at what's going on in Ukraine, whatnot. He's coming after critical minerals. Mm-hmm. So they all have a very strong, you can make a case for any of these, right? And, it could be some of these, all of these, but they have some clear direction. They're able to think, they're able to come up with, something solid that is tethered, that does have some basis in reality, and then go from there. Now compare and contrast with the other party. Got everybody laughing at me.
Yeah.
See how easy it is to make a slip of the tongue, kits and cups, by the way. Thank God I thank God I was only talking about choking chickens, not supporting Hamas. Jeez. Man. Whew. Okay, so the debate continues, and they basically ask, what's your first move if 25% tariffs do come in? Bayless, because he said in his opening that because he's a businessman, he knows what Trump can do. He says, I predicted that he would go for steel, and he did, and all that kind of stuff. He's saying that, they're going to go, the United States is going to go for industries where they have overcapacity, so expect softwood lumber and dairy to be next. So he would show up there. Freeland is saying, we need to build more pressure from the inside, by going after things like, 100% tariffs on Tesla vehicles and stuff that consumers in key states will really feel, so that they get upset like this, or if they're starting losing their jobs with the counter tariffs, they put pressure on the government from their end to have the tariffs lifted, because that's what worked last time. Karina Gould says bringing people together for a bigger plan, make it a sort of big council of the Federation meeting. And Mark Carney says he believes also in bringing people together, but he would do it more as a first minister's meeting instead, and using our strategies to amplify effects that are already being felt in the United States. So let's say, some of our allies are applying some pressure, and somehow is there anything we can do to Me Too on top of that to amplify that effect? Then they asked what should be Canada doing with its allies given the geopolitical shifts around the globe. So again, like talking more about working with allies and stuff. But Chrystia Freeland outright said the U.S. is turning predator, and reminding the members that she had also been foreign minister in the past. So you got to be ready for a world in which the U.S. no longer wants to lead, but Canada could be a leader in shaping that world. Bayless said to rally everyone that's been targeted, all their international partners, and maybe focus on something like trying to bankrupt Boeing. Those planes got to be built somewhere. If we stop buying them,
yeah, no kidding.
What happens? And to announce that we're suspending any defense contracts.
Well, hasn't Boeing done a pretty good job of sabotaging themselves over the last few years?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah, really. But suspend any defense contracts we have, like for 60 days until like these tariffs come off, and if they don't come off, just cancel them altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Carney says you can't avoid the impact of President Trump, but we have to do some very important things like protect the Arctic, work on data architecture, how we're going to handle AI, leveraging all of our assets from critical minerals to clean energy to harden our relationships with our allies. So they all have a good view. Now, if we go to 4536, Mr. Grizzly, the big question here one of the big questions with regard to the U.S. is our commitment to NATO and how we're going to meet our funding.
Okie dokie.
And here, I want you to watch Karina Gould, because this is one of the moments where Karina Gould, this is actually like the end of the previous question. Then the moderator will ask the question from NATO, and Karina Gould gets to, you will see that Karina Gould, I think, will pick up on what she says here when it comes to her turn the second time around. But I wanted to show this because this shows her that she's not afraid to go for Mark Carney and challenge him and push him a little bit. And she was the only one really who did this.
Okay.
Mark, you talked about reaching NATO targets, but of all of us on stage, you plan to reach those not until 2030, but the imperative to do that is now. You talked about the fact that the Arctic is under threat. We don't have time to wait for this. We have to actually make sure that we are investing here in Canada, reaching those targets, because our country, our sovereignty is under threat, and we are in a new world. And so the time to make those investments is now.
I do have a question about the targets coming up, so we will get to that. And just finally on this topic, Ms. Freeland.
I do believe we need to hit 2% by 2027, and we need to be focused on spending the money here in Canada with Canadian companies. But I want to be sharing a message from all of us directly with President Trump. What you are hearing from the Liberal Party of Canada is our sovereignty is not negotiable. Canada is not for sale. We are going to stand with all Canadians and not become the 51st state. And Pierre Poilievre wants to imitate you, but we are going to defeat him. And together, we're going to fight for Canada.
So guess what? That question's coming up right now, Ms. Gould, so we can follow up. Mr. Carney, I'll give you the opportunity, because today the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, announced 2.5% of their GDP for defense spending by 2027. Everybody has spoken about boosting our own GDP in different years, so we'll clarify with you. Would you do the same? 2.5% by 2027?
Well, look, the first thing, we're starting from a different position than the UK is. But it also goes to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. I think this goes to a fundamental point about how to manage government. The outcome here is securing Canada to protect Canadians. Now, I was born in the Arctic, born in the Northwest Territories. I know it well. I know the imperative. The imperative in the Arctic is to have at least 2 new bases in the Arctic, probably Tuktoyaktuk and Inuktitut. We need to build out on NORAD. We need to build out cyber capabilities. We need to build out our frontier. The core point, I will spend defense dollars in Canada, not the 80% that this government has spent in the United States up until now. 80% of capital's defense dollars have gone to the United States. I will spend them in Canada, and I will spend them as rapidly as possible to secure for Canadians. But that is a management thing. It's not an arbitrary target.
Ms. Gould makes a good point, though. You had mentioned, I think, 2030.
I said by 2030.
Right.
And I said, when I said it, that we will do faster if we can deploy it faster in Canada. This is a management point. This is a core point about delivering security. And that is the issue, not just pushing money out the door.
1 minute for you, Ms. Freeland.
I think what it is about is will and a plan and commitment to defend our country. So I've put forward a plan to hit 2% by 2027. It is critical that we spend that money here in Canada on Canadian companies, and we need to be thinking about the next generation of warfare, as we're seeing in Ukraine. Drones, AI, these are really important. Our 2% should not be about sending checks to the United States. Critically, we need a plan to defend our own borders, very particularly the Arctic, and we need to be working with our Nordic and EU NATO partners. They have nuclear weapons. We need to say to them, we need a plan to protect and defend our shared Arctic without the US. And Canada will step up because it's our sovereignty that's at stake as well.
Mr. Bayliss, you have 1 minute now.
Yeah, so about a year ago, I published a letter and said that we should meet our 2% GDP in defense spending and that we should do it by 2030. That was a 6-year time frame. And even at 6 years, to do it intelligently, it's actually quite compressed. So anybody can spend money and everybody can waste money. But to do it intelligently and such that it impacts and comes into Canada and we're buying Canadian products, Canadian services and that's not as easy. So I can't say that we would get to 2% in 3 or 4 years. I don't think that's doable in an intelligent way. There are some things we can do, which I did say, which is we should pay our armed forces much better. We're not doing that. We need to raise their pays, raise their benefits. Then I proposed something called CARD, which is the Canadian Agency for Advanced Research in Defense. And this is taking something that the Americans do, and they have their program called DARPA. So I'm copying that program where they invest in research and development in Canadian companies. They develop something, now we see it's working, then we can procure it. So I want to make the spending, but it won't happen that fast.
Okay, Ms. Gould, now over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. So, I mean, I think you hear from all of us that we want to increase our defense spending. It's just a matter of who's going to do it in the timely way that we need to do it. And I'm committed to doing it by 2027. And there are 2 ways that we can do this. First, by increasing the salaries of our Canadian Armed Forces. We do not pay our military personnel a sufficient wage in this country, and they are there for us when we need them most. And so we need to pay them more. That's something that I would do immediately as Prime Minister. Second, what can we do? You know, Mr. Carney talked about military procurement, but our military procurement isn't working. We have a lot of orders on the docket. We need a procurement czar to get those orders moving. And while I entirely agree with a Made in Canada solution, we need to ensure that our troops have the equipment, the tools, and the resources that they need to fight and protect us here at home and around the world.
Okay, this isn't a debate period, but I do see everybody wants to jump in. Ms. Freeland and then Mr. Carney.
I just want to push back against the idea that managerial or technocratic obstacles should get in the way of defending Canada. We really need to act with the fierce urgency of now. We need to recognize President Trump has said dozens of times he wants us to be the 51st state. I don't think any of us wants to be the leader who was asleep at the wheel and didn't get Canada defended, did not work with our democratic allies to protect our borders. They want to work with us. It's time for us to step up at home, to urgently reach out to them and build a new world order where democracy and Canadian sovereignty is protected.
Mr. Carney, you're up next.
I'm going to associate myself. I'm going to agree with that. The only amendment I'm going to make is, unfortunately, it won't be a world order. It will be a subset of the world order because the number of like-minded countries is much smaller with the U.S. exiting. But I want to make an important point because a huge element of securing Canada is going to be related to information warfare. It's going to be related to cyber. It's going to be related to artificial intelligence. And it's crucial that we're in Montreal. We're in one of the centers of artificial intelligence excellence. There are others in this country. It's crucial that we're building those capabilities on Canadian technologies, to Canadian values, to protect Canadians, because we can't rely on foreign suppliers for them. That is one of the new realities that are there. So the natural approach here is gone. And that's one of the main priorities I would have in terms of securing Canada.
Mr. Bayless, jump in there.
Yeah, so I'd like to give you an example of how we can do this intelligently and how we can do it the wrong way. If we try and push tens and tens of billions of dollars out the door within 3 years for government procurement of defense, it's going to be wasted. It's going to be splashed all over the place, and we're not going to get what we need. The program that I'm calling for, CARD, Canadian Agency for Advanced Research and Defense, what we would do, I'll give you an example with respect to drones. Right here in Quebec, we have a very strong aerospace industry. So we would give out 5 or 6 research contracts, and none of this, by the way, is subject to our trade agreements, and see who comes up with the best drone. And once we have that, then we can go and say, we're going to buy that from you. But to develop it and get it done like that, that's not going to happen. So if we try to do this too quickly, we're going to be wasting money, and we're going to be wasting an excellent opportunity to build Canadian industry.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you. I would push back gently on that to say that getting our troops the equipment and the supplies and the tools they need to defend Canada is not wasted money. It's actually imperative for them to defend and protect us in this time. But Mark brought up an interesting point about capabilities here in Canada. And as the Minister of Democratic Institutions, I put in place Canada's first ever and only plan to protect our country from cyber attacks in our democracy. And as part of that, I know that we have one of the premier cybersecurity institutions through the CSE here in Canada. But what we don't have is our own intelligence agency that can work to collect foreign intelligence. Now might be the time that we need to establish those capabilities. We heard earlier today that the Americans had thought about removing Canada from our Five Eye partnership. We rely too much on the Americans for intelligence internationally, and we need to ensure that Canada has the capacity and the capability to protect ourselves, to work with democratic partners, and to ensure more than anything, we are protecting Canadians, Canadian industry, and our economy at a time of intense cyber espionage. And this is something that is an important policy for today in 2025.
Ms. Freeland, jump in there.
You know, I really believe in Canada and Canadians, and there is this wave of passion in our country to defend our country. One of the reasons that I decided to run for the leadership is I had a conversation after Trump made his 51st state threat with a couple of very brilliant young technologists who worked with Jeff Hinton, the Nobel Prize-winning father of AI. And they said to me, we know what's happening in Ukraine, and we see how technologists are leading the fight. We are patriotic Canadians. We believe in our country. We need a government that gets that, that invests in us, because we are ready to stand on guard for Canada. And that is the approach we need to take. I think we need to have confidence that Canadians, empowered and led by a government.
We'll come back to Mr. Kearney in a moment. I thought we should jump in. Oh, your mic's not.
There you go. Yeah, I was not plugged in the right spot there.
There you go. You're way out of frame. You got. Oh wait.
Yeah, I am way out of frame. There we go. Yep, there you go.
I gotta really.
Oh my God! It's like the whole family reunion all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Hello.
She's wearing,
Okay.
You can't really see it because the chair kind of hides it, because my chair is coated in green material, but she's wearing one of Cassie's aprons.
Ah, lovely. Ah, great. Thank you. Okay, so again, in this section here, you saw a whole bunch of good things. Again, quality content, different views on this, right? You have Frank Bayless, saying like, let's be realistic. If you want to get that much money,
I really like Frank Bayless. I really like this guy. I mean, I didn't know anything about him prior to this.
Right.
And I'm like, I think this man would make a very good leader.
But
look,
not a fringe candidate, right?
Not a fringe candidate.
Fringe in any way.
All four individuals running for Liberal leadership, any one of them would make a great leader. I think if Chrystia Freeland becomes leader, that will bring the party down in the next federal election. And it's only because she was so heavily tied to Justin Trudeau. Whereas Karina Gould is kind of, we've known about her. I don't think a lot of Canadians do.
Right.
And now she's really making herself known. She's making a name for herself right now. And I'm fine with that because I think she is the future of that party. I firmly believe that. I've said it, I don't know how many times on this program. I do believe she is the future of the party. I do believe she will be prime minister one day. I really hope to see it because I think she would make a great prime minister. She would govern for all Canadians, not just the ones that wear a certain color.
Yeah. So immediately after the section 5821 about, this was the section that I'm going to present here next, is the strongest section of the night by far.
Okay.
By far. It's a little long, but here you will see, again, as you saw Karina Gould push back on Carney. So, say, hey, wait a minute. You said by 2030. That's not really fast enough. But you see how it was polite, right?
Yes.
It's the challenge, right? It isn't like fisticuffs, but it's there. It's push. Karina Gould, very early on in this, will say, I think one sentence or sentence and a half, and there are two very subtle digs on Carney in it. So like I said this is several times. They'll answer this. They'll give a question. Canadians are living in tough economic times. As Prime Minister, what would be your priority to strengthen our economy? They each get like 1 minute answer on that. And then they go into the debate section. Like this, the debate section starts by asking about 2 million people going to food banks. And once you get there, I have check marks for Mark Carney, then check marks for Karina Gould, then check marks for Christopher Freeland, then check marks for Frank Baylis, and then a flame for Karina Gould, then fire for Christopher Freeland, and then 2 more check marks for Mark Carney somewhere along the way. So it's just like, this is, and you can tell like at the beginning of the debate, sometimes where they're a little slower, now they're talking more like normal people. The pace is starting to pick up. Yes. So if you bear with me, we'll go for close to 20 minutes.
Oh,
But you got to see it because this is like the best.
all right.
like-
Well, we'll run it and go from there. Go.
20,
First
13
theme.
actually.
We are going to move on now to the second theme of this evening. And this is going to be a question for all of you. It's a 1-minute question. And I'm going to start with Mr. Carney this time. So Canadians are living in tough economic times. As Prime Minister, what would your priority be to strengthen our economy?
Well, I think I'll start my answer by saying this will be one of my top priorities jointly with these issues that we just touched on, largely with the U.S. and the threats to our security. A focus on building our economy on several layers. First and foremost, this is a time to build. We have an enormous opportunity to build our economy. That means building millions of homes. We're millions of homes short in this country. Everyone who's trying to buy a home is aware of that, particularly young. It's building infrastructure, both conventional energy infrastructure and clean energy infrastructure. It's building up on the conversation we just had, on intelligence infrastructure. It is diversifying our trade partners with new trading routes, and it's creating one Canadian economy instead of 13. That's what's necessary to move this country forward from where we are today, which has become quite a weak position economically.
We will dig into some of those topics a bit more. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thanks. Thanks, Hannah. I think your question was actually about the cost of living for Canadians. It wasn't about, the macroeconomic picture, which we know is doing okay for Canada. But when Canadians, people, don't feel like that, it's not working for them. I'm glad to hear, my colleague talk about housing. It's one of the first times I've heard him talk about it during this campaign. I put out a very bold, ambitious plan on housing that would eliminate homelessness, that would build millions of homes, and that would help first-time homebuyers get into the market. I've proposed a 1% GST tax cut from 5 to 4% to help Canadians with the immediate cost of everything. And I've put forward a plan to modernize our social safety net and put us on a path towards a basic income. Canadians are struggling. We need to help them make ends meet. That's what leadership looks like, and that's what the economy means to me. It's about people.
Ms. Gould, thank you. Mr. Baylis, you're up for a minute.
Yes, I put together a plan, an economic plan. I call it my prosperity plan. And I'm going to bring fiscal discipline to Ottawa. And yes, we're going to have to stop running deficits. It has a direct impact on the value of our dollar, and that has a direct impact on affordability. So I will not be cutting the GST. I'm going to modernize our healthcare system to get it to do a lot better with less. That's our biggest spend for provinces, our biggest transfer from the federal government. I'm going to increase productivity. This is something I know from my work in business, but it's something as well that I'm going to bring to government. And also, I'm going to do a lot of procurement as much as possible within our trade rules from Canadian companies. Together, this is going to put us on the right path. Now, people will say, what date? What date, Frank, are you going to end deficits? I can't give you a date, but what I can say is this. We're going to stop going down this pathway, and we're going to start going down this pathway of budgetary balanced budgets. And this is going to raise our dollar, and that'll be better for everyone in the long run.
Okay, and 1 minute now to Ms. Freeland.
All economic plans today have to start with an effective response to President Trump. He is the biggest economic menace our country and Canadians are facing. I have a plan to make us united, strong, and smart, and to win. I think we also all recognize that President Trump is also handing us a golden opportunity Canadians right now really get how wonderful Canada is, and they understand we're under threat. And so today we have a chance, a once-in-a-generation chance, to make Canada stronger, richer, more prosperous, more resilient. I'm going to seize that opportunity. I'm going to cut interprovincial trade barriers. I'm going to cut red tape and get things built. I'm going to use government procurement not to send checks to the US, but to invest in Canadian jobs and Canadian companies. That's how we make Canada stronger, more resilient. That's how we stand up to President Trump.
We are going to move into the 5-minute section. So I'm just going to lead off with a question, but I'm sure you may have things you want to jump in on each candidate. Mr. Carney, you will start this 5-minute debate. Others can jump in. Last year in Canada, there were over 2 million visits to food banks. That's the highest in our history. For people who are at home, how would you make it more affordable for them?
Okay. I would like to come back to some of the points raised, but this is such an important issue. I'll go straight to affordability. You know, what's happened in this economy over the last 5 years is that people's wages have not kept up with the rise in prices. So we've had the average family of 4, their food basket has gone up by more than 25%. Their wages haven't kept pace with that. So, and we see the growth in food banks, but we see everyday middle-class families struggling as a consequence of it. So a huge range of things need to be done to improve affordability. And let me list some of those because they're crucial. The first thing is my government will make a middle-class tax cut. Secondly, my government will remove, as Ms. Freeland will, remove the GST for first-time home buyers. This is a crucial point, getting on the home ladder. We need to, if we have one Canadian economy, we can reduce prices by 15%. If we have greater competition in our economy, which my government will deliver, in groceries, in broadband, in transportation, that will bring prices down. That will help people move ahead. So we have to tackle the affordability issue across the board. Last point, absolutely have to keep in place the progress that the government has made on crucial things such as childcare, on dental care, and farmer care, because that helps those who are most vulnerable.
We'll talk a little bit about healthcare soon, too. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you, Hannah. You know, when my colleagues talk about households, I talk about families. When they talk about, you know, the macro picture, I talk about what it means for individuals. And I'm so proud that I was able to deliver affordable childcare for families across this country. And I would expand that to include before and after school care as well. But when we're talking about people who are going to food banks, we're talking about the most vulnerable in our society. A middle-class tax cut or removing the GST on new homes isn't going to help those folks. But you know what will? Modernizing our social safety net, making sure that seniors who live on a fixed income, persons with disabilities, folks who have lost their job, who need support to retrain and rebound are better off. And that's why I'm talking about opening a path towards a basic income. Poverty costs money. That's why we need to work to eliminate homelessness. It's why I would work with provinces and territories to have specific accords to ensure that folks who get into housing can stay stable and that they can enter the workforce and join and be prosperous. We need to tackle poverty in this country. It is urgent for us to do, and it is something that I am promising that I will work on with Canadians to ensure that every person in this country has a real, viable opportunity for success.
Ms. Freeland, you're up next.
I am so glad to have childcare mentioned. As finance minister, one of the things I was so grateful to be able to do was to introduce in my first budget a national system of early learning and childcare. And it was wonderful to work first with Ahmed Hussein, get that first crucial deal with BC and a bunch more. And then Ahmed handed the baton to Karina and we worked together. This is generational. It's transformational for Canada. My affordability plan includes 100,000 more childcare places. It includes a middle-class tax cut. It includes a cut on credit card fees. It includes a cut on taxes for first-time home buyers. And the critical thing for us to all remember is the real threat to Canadian families, the real threat to people working really hard and struggling to get by is not anyone on this stage. It is Pierre Poilievre. He will cut. He will bring in a cruel austerity that will hurt all the people in Canada who need the help the most. And that's why I'm proud to be a Liberal, and that's why I'm running to be the next leader of our party.
Mr. Bayless, I'm trying to pick up some time here. 30 seconds to you, and then I'm going to come over to you, Mr.
So you mentioned food banks. I've actually been on the board of directors of a food bank for 11 years. And you'll note that was over the time that I was a member of parliament. So normally I stepped off all boards because you don't want to politicize them. But the food bank said, Frank, we don't care. We need your help. Please stay on the board. So I understand this intimately. Now, what tends to happen with politicians, they did it this time. They brought the grocery store owners in and they yelled at them and screamed at them. But the reality is this. If you want to buy an orange, that grocery store has to go buy it in the United States in US dollars, bring it to Canada, convert it to Canadian dollars. Every time our dollar goes down, the price of that orange goes up. Now, if we want to get that down, working, we need to bring our dollar up and bring oranges, bananas, everything else down. That's the solution.
Mr. Carney?
I want to be clear, and Canadians feel this. I want to be clear about the, quote, strength of our economy. Our economy over the last 5 years has been driven by a big increase in the labor force, which was largely because of a surge in immigration that is now trying to be controlled, and by government spending that grew over 9% year after year after year, twice the rate of growth of our economy. Okay, so our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump. That's why we need big changes. That's the reason I'm here. That's why we need big changes to how we're managing this economy. I want to make one last point, which goes to workers. My plan, it's a time to build across this economy. We can go into more detail. It is going to be a great time going forward to be a worker in Canada. It is going to be a great time to be in the trades in Canada because we are going to build this country across this country for Canadians and with Canadians.
Ms. Gould, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We are out of time, but I want to...
Look, I'm not going to talk down Canada. I am only ever going to be a champion for this country. And when it comes to the question that was asked about poverty, we actually have to talk about people in poverty and what their lived experience is. When I was the Minister of Families, I worked on a national school food program that is now going to be supporting thousands of kids across this country and delivered childcare. But let's be clear. Poverty costs us money, and investing to tackle and end poverty, like things like the Canada Child Benefit or increasing senior supports, is going to benefit all of us.
Okay, and 30 seconds to you, Ms. Freeland, and then we'll move on.
I just want to say really quickly that we need to be really careful not to repeat conservative talking points. Canada most definitely is not broken. We are a strong, resilient country. Canadians live 4 years longer than Americans, and median wealth in Canada is higher than in the US. Trump is giving us an opportunity to make a strong economy even stronger and more resilient. And I think as Liberals, we have to remember the great legacy of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. We are the party that believes in social policy and economic policy. We know how to deliver jobs and growth, and we know how to support people. We believe in both, and that is the kind of party and that is the kind of government I will lead as Prime Minister.
We're going to have one more 1 minute issue, and we can talk about all of the other stuff in that as well. So I'm going to start, this is supposed to be with Ms. Freeland as well on this one because it was previously drawn. As Prime Minister, and we're coming back to what we were talking about when it comes to managing the nation's books, how would you manage the nation's books at this critical time? And of course, you were the former finance minister.
Yeah, well, I would start by pushing back very forcefully against conservatives who talk Canada down. The reality is Canada has a strong fiscal position. We have a AAA credit rating, and we have the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7. That was important for me to maintain a fiscally responsible position because I know that we have needed to keep our fiscal firepower dry because I saw that Trump was coming. Today, we need to seize the opportunity that Trump presents us to harness this wave of Canadian patriotism and to build a Canadian economy which is even stronger with more jobs, more investment, more prosperity. And critically, we need to remember that standing up to Trump is the foundation of all economic policies, and there could be some pain involved. The government has to be there to support workers, to support businesses. As Prime Minister, you have my commitment that I'll do that.
Mr. Bayliss, your 1 minute starts now.
So as I mentioned, I'm going to bring fiscal discipline to Ottawa. Now, when I say that, a lot of people think, okay, is he going to cut services or is he going to raise taxes? It's neither. There's a third option, which is to increase productivity. So if we increase productivity, we increase richness, we increase our tax base and everything. Now, as a business owner, I've done that. When I brought a company from 2 people to 1,000. I know how to invest intelligently to increase productivity. Added to that, as I mentioned, I've also been elected. So I'm the one person here that understands both sides of the coin. And I'm going to use that skill set to then say, okay, how do we put in place government programs that are going to help the economy work, government programs that are going to be à la bénéfice, to the benefit of businesses, and take away ones that are hurting, such as, for example, I wrote well over a year ago that the increase in capital gains was a very bad idea because it goes against what we want. It discourages investments when we want to encourage them.
Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, I'm all for increasing productivity. And in fact, last week, I announced a plan to create 1 million new entrepreneurs in this country. I'm the daughter of a small business owner. I grew up working in the family business, and I think we need to unleash that economic potential. But if someone tells you that they're going to balance the books in a very short period of time, increasing our productivity in that period of time is not going to be sufficient. And at a time when we are facing potentially one of the greatest economic shocks our country has experienced, we need to ensure that the government can be there for Canadians, like the federal government was during the pandemic with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the business loan, as well as the wage subsidy, because we will win against Donald Trump. But we need to ensure that Canadians have the income support they need and the jobs to get to when we eventually win. Thank you.
Mr. Carney, the last in the 1 minute.
Okay. Well, it was my privilege to work with Paul Martin when he balanced the books and kept the books balanced. And one of the lessons of that is the need for government to continue to focus on how effective it is spending precious taxpayers' dollars. In other words, a focus on the outcomes of programs as opposed to the dollars going in. And one thing you can see is that the scale of increase in spending and the scale of increase in the public service hasn't been matched by greater productivity in certain areas. So the focus does have to go to that in order to create the room and maintain the room for those social programs, because that is what the Liberal Party is about. One of the core things, which is to manage responsibly our fiscal position so that we can support the vulnerable in society, so we can move forward as a society. So we need to spend less and invest more.
All right. So, as I was saying, this was the most interesting because you really got to see some back and forth, and a lot of the stuff may have been subtle. But if you saw that they asked about the cost of living, and then Carney started to answer, but didn't answer about cost of living, let's talk about macroeconomics. So Karina Gould came in and says, you didn't really answer the questions, like, but I will.
Well,
Right.
what I find fascinating about this debate is that they're all so very respectful of one another
Mhm.
and polite in the most Canadian of ways. And nobody's cutting each other down rudely.
Exactly.
There's that famous passive-aggressive Canadian niceness.
Yes, exactly. So then the second question comes about the going to the food banks, and then Mark Carney cleverly responds to the Gould attack.
Mhm.
Right? I could say some things about this like this, but I'm going to go strictly to the affordability question like this without mentioning her and turning it into a virtue. That takes skill. Then Karina Gould stays on topic instead of going off, manages to stay on topic, and that's when she slips in the basic income plank.
Yes, and that's something we've championed for a while. And again, remember, universal basic income in Canada is a progressive conservative plan.
Mm-hmm. And she talks about being the person that was minister when childcare was delivered. Then you have Christopher Freeland, very, again, Canadian-wise, but you did not do that alone. I was very happy to be the finance minister who first put the money in like this and got the first deal signed with British Columbia with Ahmad Hussein, who then passed the baton over to Karina. So you didn't do all of it, and you didn't do all of it alone, honey, like this. But again, not mentioning her and whatnot, just like, but I did, and I'm very happy about this. So it's just these subtle little pushbacks right here. This, then you get Frank Bayless, actually mentioning food bank at one point, and like mentioning, I happen to be on the board of one, which kind of adds to credibility. Then we have Mark Carney again saying, we need big changes, jobs, all that kind of stuff, because our economy is a little weak. And it's about the second time he says this. And then Karina Gould, I'm not going to talk down Canada. Our economy is weak. Our economy might be broken. Maybe. So trying to right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you see what she's doing there. It's
yes.
Just a nice little pushback, but just subtle, nice little subtle shove. There you go. It's like this. And if I was Mark Carney too, I would probably stop saying that our economy is weak.
Well, I want to read a quote here.
I mean, I know where he's going with it.
Yeah, no.
But
I want to read a quote here from Andrew Perez. We follow each other on the Twitter. He's principal of Perez Strategies, political commentator and liberal strategist, freelance writer, nonprofit board leader at Fife House and other things. So here's what he has to say. I find this fascinating, and I completely agree with what he's saying. I'm not necessarily in lockstep, but I agree with him. He says modern day conservatives of the Pierre Poilievre variety won't like this liberal leadership debate because it's everything their party and leader aren't. It's serious, substantive, diplomatic, and eschews name-calling and character assassinations. He goes on to say, I've been a federal liberal partisan for 20 plus years, but the past year has been really difficult to be a liberal. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But I'm really proud to be a federal liberal this evening watching this debate. Well done, all candidates.
Right. So I wanted to bring you that section. I know it was a little longer, but there was substance, there was policy, and there was pushback, and there was challenging, and none of it had to be nasty.
Oh, and then this is one of the comeback from a blue check mark. I'll call a person. I'm not going to get mean, but this is the part that kills me. This is the statement. Over all of the four candidates that were in the debate last night, this individual says, none of them stand a chance against Pierre. He is head and shoulders above. You clearly do not understand the definition of substantive. By all means, tell us one substantive thing any of them will do. You can't because they talk in platitudes. If anybody actually believes that Pierre Poilievre could debate any of those folks one-on-one, let alone 4 against 1, or
on substance,
on any, not just substance, on any actual metric, if you actually believe he would come out on top, you need to seek psychotherapy quickly.
Pierre could actually come out top in the metric of like presentation, talking fast, sounding like he knows what he's talking about, rattling off a lot of numbers,
Sure.
speaking confidently and smugly, and all that type of stuff. And I guess, but on any set, but if you're
That's
looking
like Ben
for
Shapiro.
depth,
That's
yes,
like
exactly,
Ben Shapiro.
Exactly. But if you're looking for any depth of any kind, any substance, any meaning, whatnot, you can't.
Talk fast, talk quickly, speak in short words, say nothing. That's Pierre Poilievre. That is not a debate. If you pay attention to him when he speaks, he talks for 30 or 40 minutes and never says anything. Stop the crime, build the homes. What? You have no policy or plan to do that. How do you intend to do that? Please give me a fully costed platform on how you intend to do any of those things, because he's never done it. And when it comes to build the homes, isn't the current government of Canada actually doing that right now?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to building homes under Pierre Poilievre's ideology, it would be much like Doug Ford's. Hand it over to developers and let them do it so they can profit bigly.
Well, Pierre Poilievre is that. I mean, Pierre Poilievre is talking about selling federal lands to builders like this rather than leasing them. It's like that was exactly the green belt. So Pierre Poilievre is essentially bringing the green belt to the federal government, but spreading it across all public lands. Because the last thing we need is yet another conservative selling public lands to developers.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Especially if you live in Ontario, I think you've had your fill on that.
Yeah.
I got a couple. I've got little time, but I've got a couple of short moments here to
I
show
have some
you.
great Easter eggs. I have
Okay.
some great Easter eggs for later.
Yeah. 122.25, Mr. Grizzly.
One moment, sir.
I wanted to single this one out because there's two things that happen in this very brief moment. Karina Gould talks to us about what she thinks the job of a prime minister is, and it's actually really, really good. So I thought I'd highlight it. And then Mark Carney shows that he can make the most of the shortest possible moment.
Social infrastructure, and we have the national will to really do this because we know we need to be more resilient because we're at this critical moment for our country, facing the need to stand up to Trump and defend our sovereignty and our economy.
That was not 15 seconds, but we'll try again. Karina Gould, 15 seconds for you, and then I am going to give Mr. Bayless 15 as well.
The job of Prime Minister is to connect with Canadians, and it's to ensure that you are placing the priorities of Canadians at the center of everything that you do. That's why tackling things like homelessness and housing affordability actually make people's lives more affordable. That's the job of being a politician. It's putting the human face on policy.
Mr. Bayless, 15 seconds.
So with respect to productivity, I'm one of those people that says, what's best practices? Now, one of the leaders in productivity in the world is Ireland, and they have a very clear axiom of belief. Capital gains should be lower because it encourages investments. Whether you're on the right or the left of the spectrum, they all know that. They keep their capital gains tax very low, and that encourages the investments that they need for productivity.
Literally 5 seconds, Mr. Carney.
It's time to build. We should support builders, and those are people who take risk for our country.
Okay, we are going to move on to our third theme this evening. I want to thank you for that last one. It was really...
Mark Carney shows that he can work in 5 seconds. Number one.
Yeah.
And Karina Gould, how about that for an answer?
Mm-hmm.
What is the job of a prime minister? Just throws it in to put a personal face on policy, a human face.
Yeah, but like I said, she's the future of the party. She is the future of that party. She is. As simple as that. Yep. And I think she will make a great prime minister one day. I honestly do.
Yep. So, kits and cubs, that's going to be it for me for today. Because I've got just a little bit of time to do the extra, and then Mr. Grizzly will show you the Easter eggs, which I will probably watching along with you on YouTube. But that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we loved making this for you. We will have more recap of the debate on tomorrow's show as well to go with it, because there were a couple of other sections that we'd like to tell you at least what was said. So we're not finishing this just like this. There's more, but I think you got the sense that we have some really good quality candidates that are really willing to debate substance, that can hold their own, that can show that they can push back, that they want it. It is a contest like this, but while not burning the party down at the same time.
I'm impressed with Frank Bayless. I didn't know anything about him before, but now I'm impressed with him.
Yeah.
He looks like a leader. I mean, his comportment, the way he speaks, the way he's very direct, he instills confidence. You know who he reminds me of?
Who?
Jack Layton.
Ah,
In the way he carries himself. He reminds me of
interesting.
Jack Layton.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd have to ponder that, but you
Political
might be onto
ideology
something.
might be a little bit different,
Yeah.
but he reminds me of Jack Layton.
In terms of how he carries and presents himself, yeah, you might.
Mm.
Jack had a little more happiness.
Well,
This, but,
I mean, he's
but Frank
relatively.
is not. Yeah, but Frank's not incapable of it. I've seen it.
Well, and he's fairly new to this. Yes, he was a member of parliament before, but being on a national stage is new to him.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those wondering, then, like I said, just as I mentioned earlier, when we went through the themes, the last two themes were on supporting Canadians and climate change, and we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow. But there, the sections were the debate maintained its high level and its high quality, but there wasn't as much pushback and there wasn't as much fireworks or anything like this, and there weren't any answers that stood out big, like saying like a UBI or whatnot with like a huge big policy thing. But it was all good in quality. It's just the parts that I showed you were so much better than everything else, and all of it was good. So I'm not showing it, not showing it to you because it was bad or it was boring or whatnot. It's just so I would basically show you the whole debate if I didn't pick a few things. So so I tried to keep it to digestible amount. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember, word of mouth is priceless and sharing is caring. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us, and especially do spread the news that that the lines have started to intersect on the polls, because I'm sure the conservatives are going to love that. You're going to watch all those conservative trolls show the one poll that has the biggest margin go, see, what about this one, huh? It's like, okay, and you believe in your dreams.
Well, and I don't give a shit about polls, you know that.
So now, if you would like to help us out, Kits and Cubs, by subscribing to our show because you don't want to miss our podcast, that QR code that just appears on the screen will bring you to our pod page. That's podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver, lowercase letters with hyphen between each one of those words. And thanks to the Ray Girl, if you click subscribe there, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. Now, if you would like to support us in other ways, surf on down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, like, share, and subscribe. And I see that we have reached a milestone today. Thank you so much. All these new subscribers that are joining us recently, but thank you so much. We're now at 13,000 subscribers, so we've crossed the mark. Thank you. That's a big milestone. And we're coming close to hitting 500,000 views on our channel as well. So thank you, Kits and Cubs, for all your support. It means the world to us. But come and click on our buttons, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us with the algorithm. Now, if you'd like to help us in yet another way, Kits and Cubs, well, we do incur some costs bringing this show to you, and we have a little tip jar that we affectionately call the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund. And if you would like to drop a little bit of coinage in there to give us an atta beaver, an atta grizzly, to let us know that you enjoy what we do and would like to encourage us to do more, we would be most grateful. So that's coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word, or the QR code that's up in the corner there. Scan that and we'll bring you there. And if you can leave a little something, we would very much appreciate it. And all donations instantly make you 17.8% more interesting at parties. It's just a fact. Now, if you would like to, for example, communicate with us because you want to let us know what you think, because this is your show too, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is our email address. Please write to us. We love to hear from you. And if you would like to donate to us directly by buying 100% Canadian, not going through PayPal, which is owned by a USC bro, then if you send us a direct transfer through our email address, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com, well, we get 100% of your donation, and it's 100% Canadian because it goes through Canadian banks. So there you go. Buy local. But let us know your thoughts. If you want to write to us, also, you can reach us at the Blue Sky Beaver Lodge, at True Eager at The Bad Place, our Facebook page, True North Eager Beaver, or right down here in the comments section if you're watching on YouTube. We try to read absolutely everything. So thank you so much. And I see this here from, I'm guessing this is from Kit Coffee House here. I wrote to you on Blue Sky, and I'd like to have you on Friday night. Let's talk Canadian environment. I think I might actually be able to do that, Kid Coffee House. So yes, let's talk. All right. That's it for all that kind of stuff, the coffee stuff. So, because democracy is something that you do, remember Quebec Liberal leadership race, a by-election in Manitoba, federal Liberal leadership race now. Make sure that if you got your thing that you're validating so that you can vote, you probably have to send some ID soon. I've heard kids tell me that they've sent something out about it. I haven't received mine yet, which is kind of interesting. So maybe it's still coming, but you will have to validate your ID in order to be able to vote. And of course, the Ontario election in 2 days. Please do go and vote for that.
Already voted by mail. Cast my
Yeah.
ballot about a week ago.
Good man. All right. I guess, Mr. Grizzly, do you have some
Well,
advice?
I don't, but Mademoiselle Fox does. So I'm just going to
Ooh,
slide back so she can
please
slide
do.
in, and then she has a couple of words to say.
Some words of wisdom from Mademoiselle Fox.
Well, I
Hello,
am.
lovely.
Good morning. I can't hear.
We can hear you.
Okay. I would like to. I'm going to say one grumpy thing, not at you, Douglas, ever, but the whole voting thing. Like, when. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit, but when I got the voter registration thing in the mail, they're like, you have
Yes.
to register to vote. I'm like, actually, I don't fucking have to. I'm going to show up to my fucking. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, it's okay.
I was so angry because it creates a barrier for people, right?
Yes.
People who,
Yes.
like, let alone, I'm a not stupid person, but I'm just like, actually, I think I just have to show up and
Yes.
vote with a driver's license.
Yes. If you live in Ontario, a driver's license will be enough. A
Yeah.
health card with a proof of address, like a bill, all that type of stuff.
Exactly.
So all you need is something that government-wise that proves your name and something that proves your address. And if you don't have either, if there's anybody in your building, in your neighborhood that has these two things and can vouch that you live where you live and they can sign that, you have that too. You don't need to be registered. You don't need to have a voter ID card. You don't need that. You just need ID that proves your name, government issued ID that proves your name, and something from an official entity that proves your address, copy of your lease, your hydro bill, your phone bill, whatnot, but mailed to you at your address from an official institution. That's
what?
it.
Thank you for that, because I didn't know the last part. And,
You didn't? I thought
no,
you
I
did.
Yes,
didn't. I didn't.
Yeah,
but
the
I'm like,
vouching.
I
If
showed
you're a
up.
new Canadian, vouching is a thing.
Yes.
Well, that's really good to know. That's a good PSA right there. And,
I thought everybody knew that.
no,
Seriously,
I
I
didn't.
thought
Or if
everybody
you've just moved into a new neighborhood, or if you're a student or something like that, vouching. Like I said, remember, if you're a student, sometimes you can vouch. You're allowed to vote in either your home riding or in the riding is where your campus is. But you have to determine that, and be consistent on that. But you can do that as well.
Well, okay. So I had my candidate. I'm just going to tell you, I've got a sign on my lawn. It's not a secret. NDP. I'm an NDIPper all the way. Voted for Catherine McKenney, but one of her canvassers came to the door and they're like, "See, we know you have a sign. Can we count on your vote?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go on voting day." And they're like, "Could we encourage you to go early because it lifts a burden off of us to know?" So I went to my community center. I walked in with a piece of with my driver's license, in and out in 5 minutes. And I'm like, this is democracy. This is beautiful. I was welcomed at the door. I was escorted right in. It was like so easy. And then, my kids are like, I'm like, my son, I'm like, okay, Lola, I'm like, you're going to vote, right? He's like, of course I'm going to vote. I'm like, well, the only thing I ask of you is to get your sister to vote. And she's 19. And she's like, well, I can't vote because I didn't register for the vote. And I'm like, nope, you can just go. So I'm like, anyway, they're like, we know you don't want us to vote for Doug Ford. I'm like, vote for whoever you want. Spoil your ballot. Just show up. I'll get you a freedom sausage.
Yes.
Well,
I heard Lola going, row, 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 telling you to vote.
She's
too.
like, what? Sausage?
one of the things that I've been saying for a while now, as you're well aware, is this whole get yourself registered is designed to dissuade people.
Yes.
Because people think, what? I got to register? What? I'm like, no, you don't. Show up.
No.
That's all you've got to do.
Just
It
show
is literally a campaign to dissuade people from showing up at the polls. That's all it is.
I'm open to that, but I also think, have you worked for government? They're not that organized.
No, it's Doug Ford is doing this. I guarantee you.
Okay, well, I stand to be proven wrong or right. It doesn't matter. Just vote. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that, when you're having a hard day, soup it out. So yesterday was a hard day. today I'm going to make Thai garlic soup and take it to one of my ding-dongs that I'm related to, who's mad at me. Like, when in doubt, soup it out.
Ready.
When in doubt, soup it out.
My head back. I'll see you later.
All right, Mr. Grizzly, please cue the oh, Lola. I hear you, girl. I hear you, girl.
I call that my flap alarm because she wakes up really early and does that, and that wakes me up in the morning. So, all right, here we go.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and The Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.
I wanted to highlight this from Jillian. It says they're creating a false gateway to suppress the vote, and that's kind of what I've been saying. For those curious, the background, that's downtown Calgary from Major Tom's. It's a rooftop restaurant in downtown Calgary. I do have a couple of Easter eggs that I wanted to share with you, and I will start with, I'm going to start with a still because, yeah. So you know how Donald Trump is all about assigned gender at conception, which means we're all female. Then he posted this very strange and bizarre video. Complete batshit lunacy on the president's Truth Social account. Yes, he really posted this, and yes, he did. It's a video of Gaza, but oh, look at that. Are those bearded belly dancers? Why, yes, they are. Bearded belly dancers. I'm not going to show you the video. I'm just showing you this still from the video. I just paused it when I'm like, what? Yes, those are men with breasts belly dancing. Unless you know women with thick beards like that. Anyway, I guess he's not anti-trans as we thought he was. Maybe I'm incorrect. And then, of course, from Lori Goldstein, who I don't know. He's not editorializing this. He's just making a statement. And I think it's a subtle editorialization because Lori is like me on medication to help along with his mental health. I don't know what meds he's on, but he is, and he's talked about it. And he says Alberta to build 2 involuntary treatment centers for people with severe addictions, laying the foundation for the first legislation of its kind in Canada that would allow adults to be forced into treatment without their consent. Now that, my friends, is bad news. Very bad news. And then when it comes to the Republican Party in the United States of America, this article was published at 5:59 a.m. today. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to put it on the screen. And then we'll scroll through it a little bit from salon.com. A woman is like a child. MAGA quickly turns its sights on stripping Republican women of power. I will read this to you so that you get the gist of it. So bear with me while I bring it over here so I can read it. For decades, the anti-abortion movement has aggressively promoted women into visible leadership roles. It's for cynical reasons, namely to bat off entirely accurate accusations that the movement is misogynist. Never mind that there have always been women who are eager to police the bodies and behavior of other women. Enough people are credulous or at least disingenuous enough to think that I'm a woman, which means I can't hate other women, is an actual argument. For ambitious women who wanted to climb the ranks of Republican politics, anti-feminism has long been the steadiest of ladders. The propaganda value of their gender outweighed their party's larger hostility to women in leadership. But now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned and Donald Trump is back in the White House, many on the right feel they no longer need to hide the naked sexism fueling their movement or put up with the annoyance of women in even token leadership positions. As Kira Butler at Mother Jones reports, the anti-abortion movement is embroiled in an escalating civil war right now over these issues. Male leaders of the Christian right have been swarming Kristen Hawkins, the 39-year-old head of a student anti-abortion group, demanding her ejection from the movement. It started after she objected to Republican legislatures introducing bills to charge women who get abortions with murder, an extreme move she fears will backfire on the movement. But mostly, it was about growing male anger on the Christian right that women are allowed leadership positions at all. Remove this women from public service, declared influential Christian nationalist Pastor Joel Webron, part of the Theo Bros movement that includes the leadership of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's church. Soon other Theo Bros jumped in, declaring, "We need Christian men leading the fight against abortion," arguing that women's suffrage was a mistake and accusing Hawkins of emasculating her husband by being busy jet-setting. Good God Almighty. I will paste this into the chat so people can read it for yourselves. It is incredibly disturbing. There's another article. I'm not even going to read the title of the article because it will be triggering for a lot of people, but there's another article here that was referenced in that one from salon.com. I've posted that in the chat as well. The next thing I want to bring you just before I leave you for today is this bit of good news. Because we need some good news, especially when things are going sideways, backwards, upside down, and everybody is just upset at everybody else. With all of the terrible news flooding the airwaves as of late, I thought it would be nice to share with you this little tidbit of goodness.
We're all aware of the political tension between Canada and the U.S. right now, but over the weekend, an American couple dining at this restaurant stood up, apologized for what Donald Trump is doing, and paid for everyone's lunch.
The lady said, "Oh, we're from Michigan and we love our Canadians and we support you guys 100% and we love coming over here. We love supporting small businesses and we just wanted to show our appreciation and we want to pay for everyone in this restaurant today." And then I'm like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, okay, like I was kind of stunned because nobody has ever done that. Like in our 9 years of being in business, nobody has ever paid for the whole restaurant.
Trump has repeatedly said he would like Canada to become America's 51st state and threatened to levy some pretty hefty tariffs on Canadian goods that would enter the U.S. But those who were at Toast here on Erie Street on Saturday for lunch say the roughly 50 people erupted into cheers and applause after that couple spoke. Irene Chiez was one of those people, and I spoke with her after she was dining here with her friend for her birthday over the weekend.
I just felt really good that there was somebody to come over because we don't know how they feel. You know, truly, you hear bits and pieces, but this is somebody, a human live person coming to our city to express their feelings, you know, and their love for our country.
Chiez says that moment brought a lot of happy feelings for her at a time when she says she's upset and disturbed by some of the things Donald Trump is saying about Canada.
And there you have it, a little tidbit of good news at the end of a long day, or the beginning of a day, I guess. In this instance, the end of a long show. How's that? The end of a long show. A little bit of good news to send you off into your day today. I hope you have a wonderful day. My words of wisdom. I'm going to just repeat what Mr. Beaver always says. Be kind to and gentle with yourself, especially in these very troublesome times. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.